Please, Tanya, can you unmute yourself? Yeah.
Many thanks for the invitation, and I'm happy to be able to present this the eco schemes, a key element of the new CAP. This presentation is prepared together with Uwe Latta-Schlohmann, who can't make it today, unfortunately. And just as a hint, some of those elements have also been used and further developed in an article that will appear in EURAGRI soon, hopefully. So I will start with a brief introduction, then I will explain the new green architecture, then I will jump into the eco schemes as a core element and show some of the measures as they are currently discussed. As you know, the programming is not finalized yet. The member states are heavily discussing with the Commission about each measure, and hopefully the national strategic plans will be accepted soon so that the new CAP can start in 2023. The eco schemes have 4 CAP objectives that they target. It's climate action, environmental care, preservation of landscapes and biodiversity, and also what came at the end during the final negotiation is animal welfare and antimicrobial resistance, but I will not touch it too much, the 4th one, as we have an expert on animals afterwards. What are the main novelties? So first of all, it's the first time that we have a national strategic plan per member state, with the exception of Belgium, who has 2, where the first and the second pillar are covered. So there are more stronger interrelationships than before. And also it has been decided that a greater overall ambition on environment and climate needs to be reached. So the keyword is no backsliding. And this is something where the Commission is looking at now and discussing also with the member states. Furthermore, there is a new delivery model. The indicators that have been designed are measured against national targets, and member states are requested to have a performance monitoring and reporting. And I will concentrate today on the eco schemes that are new and they have been introduced to replace the mandatory greening in the current CAP. Also, a new element is that there is more national flexibility on the payment level of the agri-environment climate measures that are having no longer maximum payment rates, and where also when calculating the payment levels, the target of the measure itself can be much more be looked at than it was the case before, where really it was only income forgone or additional costs. And furthermore, and this needs to be kept in mind, is that there are a lot of rule details to be defined at national level so that we have some differentiations across the member states that are more pronounced than ever before. And finally, administration implementation, as said before, is always still work in progress. So what I will present today are not the eco schemes that are for sure be also offered to the farmers, but what we know so far and what is to my best knowledge. I don't want to go too far into the structure of the CAP, but I think it is relevant to understand why the eco schemes are so relevant. They take 25% of the first pillar budget is dedicated to the eco schemes. And this is quite a big share. In addition, there are also the basic payment, but the basic payment has other elements like an addition, a first hectare payment, so that the overall payments per farmers per hectare will be differentiated depending on the number of hectares, on the age of the farmers, and also on the decision of the member states to make use of coupled payments and to what degree. So this is really relevant because this has an influence on the calculation of the measure payments across the whole EU. And besides the first pillar, we remain with the traditional second pillar measures. There are little modifications compared to the current programming period. So we will maintain the agri-environment climate measures that are 5 to 7 year measures, knowing that with the new programming period being only 5 years, it is relatively clear that it will be 5 years measure. So when we look into the structure of the new CAP, we have the eco schemes sitting in the middle. They are part of the first pillar, and they are sitting on top of the conditionality. The conditionality is the former cross-compliance plus parts of the greening in the current CAP. And this is mandatory for all farmers to be respected in order to receive the basic income support for sustainability, so the premium per hectare. The eco schemes, on the contrary, are voluntary for farmers, but member states have to program them and have to dedicate a quarter of the first pillar budget to them. And on top of this comes the voluntary agri-environment climate measures, where member states this time have to dedicate overall 35% of their budget for environment and climate. So looking now into the new green architecture of the CAP, if it would be for all countries the same, it would be very easy, but the member states have a great flexibility in programming, as long as they ensure that there is no backsliding compared to the current CAP in their country. So country A, for example, enhances his engagement by offering more agri-environment climate measures in the second pillar, while country B has decided to go beyond the minimum obligation when it comes to conditionality. And country C prefers to extend the eco schemes beyond the minimum. So please keep this in mind, because it is quite relevant. When you see the different measures, you will see that some measures that are in some countries programmed under the conditionality and the enhanced conditionality are in some other countries part of the eco schemes, in some others part of the agri-environment climate measures. So you can imagine the comparison is not easy, but with this flexibility, there are also two major risks. Because if the distance between the conditionality and in particular the implementation of the GAEC requirements is too huge, there is the risk that the farmers will not engage into eco schemes nor in agri-environment climate payments. And if the cost for implementing the eco schemes are higher than the payment levels, the farmers themselves will not engage into the eco schemes, so that there will be no positive environmental effect. So when it comes to the eco schemes, there is another major distinction to the voluntary agri-environment climate measures, because farmers are legally entitled to them. They don't have a granting procedure as now, where member states can really easily tell, okay, the budget is used, so those who come first come, first serve, those who came later to apply for the voluntary agri-environment climate measures, they don't get it anymore. Here, the access cannot be denied if the farmers comply with the requirements set out in the measures. Not easy, because there's a huge uncertainty about the uptake by the farmers. And in order to overcome this problem, we have a learning period over 2 years where the budget transfer is possible between the pillars, but also between measures, in order to minimize the risk that unspent funds go back to Brussels. Each member state had to draw a list of eco scheme measures, and alongside with this, to set the payment level. And also, member states were able to decide if they give the payment as an incentive payment or as a compensatory payment. So for the first time, there is also the possibility to have, to a certain degree, an incentive payment, but it has to remain compatible with the WTO Green Box rules. And to make all measurable, there are different possibilities, either scoring system or another methodology, to make sure that eco-schemes delivers towards the target set. And finally, the principal eco-schemes are annual payments and annual measures, but they can be designed as multi-annual commitments as well. Now I jump into an overview of 15 countries that we assessed a bit more in depth to show you how impressive the diversity of the eco-schemes measures is across the EU. First of all, you see that the number of measures deviates strongly. In Hungary, we have one measure, but depending on the size of the farm with different intensity of obligations, while in Netherlands there are 21 measures that are all possible, that all of them can be selected by the farmers. They have like a menu, and each of the measure has a certain score, and depending on the score the farmers reach, they are paid at the end. Where does those eco-schemes, those novel measures come from? Many of them are derived from the current greening, so that they have core elements of the current greening as long as those elements did not become mandatory under conditionality. And furthermore, for sure, also from the agri-environment climate measures that have been so far been programmed under the second pillar. Member states were also very free when it came to the aspects, environmental aspects to be targeted. Most of them selected climate, even though there are little specific climate measures. And another intense selection was for biodiversity, who got for 10 countries priority. While you will see Austria, for example, has no biodiversity measure. This does not mean that they don't have biodiversity measures. They decided to have biodiversity measures only under the voluntary agri-climate measures in second pillar. There are many interactions between the eco-schemes and the agri-environment climate measures. So, as already indicated, both instruments have the same character and the same objectives. This leads to a situation where member states can decide to either offer it as an agri-environment climate measure or as an eco-scheme. And in both schemes, there is also the possibility to have a more innovative approach, the result-based and or the collective or the group approach. It's barely used, this possibility. Still, when programming, member states have to ensure consistency and to make sure that there's no double funding. On the right side, you see the possibilities. So either they design the eco-schemes and the agri and climate measures side by side, or they have the agri-environment climate measures as top up. And also they can decide to reach single plots or branches of the farm or the whole farm. One particularity I would like to emphasize is the strong interaction between the GAEC 8 and the eco-schemes. GAEC 8 targets the maintenance of non-productive features and areas to improve on-farm biodiversity. It was intensively negotiated, and at the end, the compromise was that, as general rule, at least 4% of the arable land at farm level are devoted to non-productive areas and features, including land laying fallow, with some exemptions for the smaller farms or the grassland-based farms. But under the conditionality already, there are two alternatives. So if farmers have more than the 4% of arable land non-productive, in that case at least 7%, they can reduce the conditionality to 3%. You will say now, but what is the sense of this? It is easy. For the 3% of non-productive land, farmers don't get any payment. This is under conditionality and farmers have to do it for free. For the additional 4%, they can be paid as an eco scheme measure. And another further option is not to use it non-productive, but to include catch crops or nitrogen fixing crops. And it is up to the member states to make use of it or not. And as I will show it now with this table, it is quite differently used. The member states intends to use it quite differently. So for example, Denmark uses the minimum, the 3% under conditionality and additional 4% under the eco scheme, but it includes not only fallow land, but also certain biotopes that are listed at member state level. While Estonia wants to make use of the possibility to have nitrogen fixing crops without agrochemical use, France decided to have a very complex system with a basic scheme, a basic measure and a superior level. So farmers can decide to go for 7% of non-productive elements or of 10%, and then they get a higher payment. In Poland, there is the possibility to create new landscape features and to take this into account. And Spain differentiated between irrigated land and non-irrigated land. And in Germany, the decision was not to reduce the conditionality, but also to design an enhanced eco scheme. But it is not only this option. One other possibility is to target fertilizer use reduction. Several countries make use of this. This is the table you see, just an example. Some countries want to have new technologies to be used to reduce the fertilizer spreading, like GPS controlled spreaders or precision spreading. Others delimit the use of non-organic nitrogen. Poland, for example, has the introduction of a fertilizer plan with soil sampling obligations, and also one scheme with photogeotagging. And Spain has a measure as an add-on for irrigated land. When it comes to the reduced use of plant protection products, also one of the Green Deal objectives, we have again the precision technology. We have in Estonia the prohibition of glyphosate use. We have in Germany the prohibition of the use of chemical synthetic pesticides at plot level. Others use beneficial pest controls, like establishment of predators or biological options. And Italy, for example, has combined the introduction of leguminous crops with reduced pesticide use. Also, another point that became possible is now to fund organic farming under the first pillar as eco schemes, meaning that there is no national funding necessary, as it would be if it would be on the second pillar. So member states who made use of this possibility to shift organic farming funding from the second to the first pillar are all those, for example, Bulgaria, Denmark, Estonia, but Netherlands introduced organic farming for the first time. And the intention is also a bit different from country to country. For example, Romania has dedicated some funds for growing of vegetable, medicinal and aromatic plants, while, for example, Bulgaria has put an emphasis on livestock, organic livestock, and in France, still heavily debated, there is no particular organic farming payment, but it is part of one of the tracks, the environment certification measure track. We have also several countries who designed eco-schemes targeting soil protection, some of them also clearly going in the direction of carbon farming or soil carbon storage. There is no tillage or reduced tillage, in some cases also direct seeding and strip tillage in several countries. Others maintain or design an eco-scheme for cover crops that goes beyond conditionality rules. And in Austria, for example, has foreseen an eco-scheme called Always Green, where they give a lot of freedom to the farmers, their farmers, but at least 85% of the farmland has to be vegetated throughout the year. Also, permanent crops are targeted in 3 countries out of the 15 that we assessed. For example, wine, fruits, and hops. There it's the greening between the rows. And liming is also seen as one option as an eco-scheme measure, sometimes in combination with other requirements. When it comes to biodiversity protection, we all know that this was the major emphasis for the current agri-environment climate measures on the second pillar. Some measures of them have been shifted also to the first pillar as eco-schemes. And this is, for example, the maintenance of natural grasslands in Bulgaria, Romania, France, and Hungary. This is mainly targeted to areas that are threatened by land abandonment to make sure that there is no encroachment. On the contrary, in Germany, for example, the intensity of the grassland use is so high that there is a measure where unmown grass strips or grass patches are paid for as an eco-scheme. So the farmers leave parts of their grassland unmown over one season just to give space for insects and also for plants and grasses to reseed. We have for sure several countries offering forest strips or also grass strips along the ditches. And just to mention furthermore, there is a quite innovative approach, the result-based approach with 4 grassland indicator species in Germany. And also innovative and absolutely new for me was that France is offering a hedgerow bonus in combination with the environmental certification eco-scheme track. And crop rotation requirements are also designed in several countries, and this is always designed as an enhanced eco-scheme, going beyond the conditionality. Finally, I would like to address an issue that is making programming really difficult. We all know that with the Ukraine war, the prices have changed. The input prices are rising, and also the prices of certain products are getting up. And at the same time, the discussion came up that securing food, sufficient cereals and oilseeds in particular, there is a wish, for example, to delay the introduction of the GAEC 7 crop rotation obligation, but also to delay or reduce the share of unproductive arable land. Nothing has been decided yet, but there are intense discussions. And what will be the consequence? So in case the conditionality obligations will be reduced, there will be a gap between conditionality and eco schemes and agri-environment climate measures. how will this gap be filled? Either member states will have to pay higher payment rates for the eco schemes and the agri-environment climate rate measures, or they will have to reduce the obligation level so that the system is still consistent. We will see how the discussions will go on. It is just to show that for the moment, nothing has been fixed, and the poor farmers who will have to decide after the harvest coming soon, latest in 2 months, still don't know how the future will look like for the measures they will have or can opt for in the next year. I would like to finalize my presentation with some conclusions. So many eco-scheme measures, as shown, are derived from existing greening measures and the agri-environment climate schemes, but still there are some novelties, and the possibility to look into the neighbor countries or other countries is helping to increase to show how broad are the possibilities when it comes to programming. While doing this, for sure, the difference in the natural settings have to be taken into consideration, but also the environmental preferences, but as well the problems prevailing in some countries. And we should not forget that the experiences with the voluntary agri-climate measures are quite heterogeneous across the EU countries, and this results in a quite diversity among the proposed eco schemes. So having similar measures programmed in one country as eco scheme, in another as agri-environment climate measures. And finally, the big question is, how will member states make sure that the 25% being earmarked as eco schemes under the first pillar of the budget will be also used by the farmers, so that we have at the end an increase of the areas under commitment, but also an added value for the environment. So for member states, it is not so easy to strike the balance, but also, as I already indicated, for farmers, it is quite challenging to decide how much they would like to engage and how they could best combine both the eco schemes and the agri-environment climate measures. Finally, I really would like to thank all the colleagues who provided the information out of the national strategic plan discussions that happened in national language, so difficulty to assess, and based on their input, we make this assessment. And if you are interested, you can also access all the CAP strategic plans, as well as the observation letters by the Commission, where the Commission has put forward where there are additional demands, but also what measures they find particularly nice. And with this picture, I would like to thank you very much for listening.